I'm Anissa Nawe in Moscow. This week, the Pentagon pours money into 2017. Russia makes their threat list once again. ISIS is spreading across Libya, and democracy shines in America. You're in the now. Almost $600 billion, the biggest defense budget in the world. 2017 will be another year of war for the U.S. With who? Russia, maybe. The Pentagon names it among top threats and is ready to spend $3.4 billion to fight it, more than 4 times last year's budget. ISIS will cost America $7.5 billion. But wait a second. If Russia and ISIS are threats to the U.S., and Russia is fighting ISIS, why spend a cent? Just have your enemy take out your enemy. David Speedy, Senior Fellow and Director of U.S. Global Engagement Program at Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs, is in the now with us. Thanks for joining us. So the Russian threat has increased 4 times, according to this budget. What's changed?
Good to be with you, Anissa. Well, what has changed? What has changed, obviously, is the increasingly poisonous atmosphere that exists between Washington and Moscow. You're quite right. In the statement released yesterday or the other day, Defense Secretary Carter announced a significant shift back to Europe in terms of the defense budget, and that, of course, can only mean one thing. I follow the logic of what you are saying, of course, that if Russia is taking on ISIS most significantly and successfully in Syria, then there ought to be a certain equation to be followed here. But I'm afraid the Washington environment at this point, particularly in an election year where the rhetoric is hot and strong, I'm afraid that's not obvious to the policymakers.
Well, it's not just rhetoric, it's money, but still, $3.4 billion. It doesn't sound like a lot if you're speaking...
Well, rhetoric...
If you're speaking in terms of $600 billion, I mean, should Moscow even be concerned here? It's a really small percentage.
Yeah, rhetoric drives the numbers, of course, is the point here. You know, I don't think it's the military budget numbers that matter so much as just the general environment of which the military expenditures are a symptom. And you're right also in something you said in your introduction that. Unfortunately, even forgetting the high level of anti-Russia feeling on the Republican side, Secretary Clinton at one point named ISIS and Russia as the 2 major threats to the United States. So it's an environmental issue in terms of the current situation.
It's interesting because you would think that terrorism was something that the U.S. and Russia could actually work together on. Is that naive?
Well. Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, in the interview that President Putin gave to Bild magazine earlier this year in Sochi, he made exactly that point, that there are areas of cooperation for the United States and Russia, terrorism being top of the list, but also such things as human trafficking, the environment, and so on and so forth. And so, unfortunately, that kind of constructive approach, again, I have to emphasize, in an election year where rhetoric will triumph over reason. But of course, Russia and the U.S. must fight together against international terrorism, whether it be in Syria or beyond.
It would make sense, but right now we have this money allotted to fight Russia. I mean, how is the United States going to fight this so-called Russian threat?
Well, it's not a question of how is it going to fight it. It's how it postures itself to fight. But obviously the areas that are being looked at here are around the Baltics, the Black Sea, where the U.S. perceives a threat from Russia. Obviously, you know, we are in what most experts agree is something at least approaching a second Cold War. But we have to hope that when the fever on this side dies down, so will be the inclination to quote, take on Russia. It doesn't make any sense in terms of American interests or those of our NATO allies, but unfortunately, it's being ratcheted up over Ukraine, over Syria, over, as I say, the so-called hotspots in Eastern Europe.
Unfortunately, sense is not always what drives politicians, both Russian and American. We are talking about money. This is the 2017 budget we're focusing on. It's a forecast for the future. I mean, what kind of geopolitical landscape changes is Washington expecting next year? If we leave the elections out of the way, I mean, this is 2017. The elections will be over by then. What are they expecting?
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, Washington doesn't habitually look into a long-range strategic crystal ball. It really is driven by the immediate. It is driven by, there are certainly, as everyone knows, differences of opinion, for example, between the Pentagon leadership and the White House. This was made obvious by recent statements by recently retired Secretaries of Defense Chuck Hagel and Robert Gates. This is not a strategic, it's more a tactical approach. So in terms of what the 2017 landscape will look like, I'm afraid it's a question of, as one person put it to me, one's muddling through rather than thinking strategically ahead. Obviously, there are some attempts in terms of the Syrian peace talks where Russia and the U.S. do sit down at the table together with others, including the Iranians. But it's difficult to see these as more than a series of tactical steps rather than a long-range vision for a secure and war-free strategic landscape.
David Speedy, Senior Fellow and Director of U.S. Global Engagement Program at Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs. Thanks so much for your analysis in the Now. There might be over 2,000 kilometers between Libya and Syria, but ISIS terrorists don't care. They need a place to hide. Libya is chaos, courtesy of NATO. It's not raining bombs, even though Western governments are threatening some kind of action. And it has oil. ISIS terrorists are already attacking key depots, the perfect place to prosper. Joining us in the Now is Heba al-Shabani, a political commentator and producer for Libya TV channel. Heba, is there one specific factor that is allowing ISIS to make such gains in Libya recently?
No, I do not really believe there is just one specific factor. I actually believe there's a lot of factors in play here. But the main one has to be that the different faction on the ground unable to find common ground to fight ISIS. They just keep fighting each other. We've been having the civil war for the past 2 years. That's basically just different militias and different factions killing each other and fighting each other for territory, for power, instead of actually unite against ISIS. So that may be the main factor here.
The U.S. seems to think that the two warring administrations that you're talking about battling or fighting for power are, quote, on the brink of getting a government of national unity. Do you think this is the actual case on the ground?
Well, the national unity government is now a fact. There is a national unity government, and they were just waiting on the cabinet of that government to be approved by the parliament in Tobruk. It's a fact now. The two different factions basically just need to face the reality and face the music, per se, and there's nothing they can do about it. All they can really do right now is to support that unity government and trying to give it as much help as possible to fight ISIS and unite Libya again.
They've known for some time, though, that ISIS was a threat, that any kind of chaos in the country would allow ISIS to prevail. What has changed? I mean, obviously ISIS is making gains, but why has it taken so long for them to form this unity?
Well, basically, from talking to all the foreign diplomats and from the international community point of view, there isn't a real partner in Libya they can work with to fight ISIS or to trying to combat illegal immigration or arms dealing. And that is the main issue here. There is no real partner in Libya. You have two governments, you have East and West, and you have all these different factions and militias and people trying to gain power. So that's why the international community pushed so hard for the UN talk and for the political deal to go through, which gave us at the end this national unity government, and hoping that this national unity government will be that partner they dream of or they want. And maybe it's not going to be a strong partner, but it's at least someone to talk to, someone to deal with directly when it comes to fighting ISIS and fighting terrorism in Libyan ground.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said this week that the country has resources, of course, speaking about Libya. The last thing in the world you want is a false caliphate with access to billions of dollars of oil revenue. It sounds pretty accurate, but will it be that accurate on the ground, so to say?
Well, ISIS already has access to billions of dollars, and not just oil revenue, but also in illegal immigration trades and in arm trades. So they already have resources. They already have this huge recruitment tool that they're using to recruit Libyan, Tunisian, Egyptian, you name it, from the entire North African region. And yeah, is it accurate? It's probably accurate. Yeah, I would say that.
Why was the fact that an unstable Libya would brew and fault terrorists not clear to most world powers after the fall of Gaddafi? We've certainly have years of signs, I think, to say the least.
Well, years of signs, I'm not sure about that, because during the revolution, the political Islam did not really show that clear intention of having power, or that hunger for power that we saw right after the revolution. During the revolution, they were more playing the role of a partner,
but it's always been clear. It's always been clear, Heba, that Libya is broken up by tribes, and there will be a clear power vacuum in the country. I mean, that much was clear, no?
Yes, but we were hoping that the GNC at that time, by electing a GNC, that vacuum will be filled finally. Sadly, that wasn't the case. It actually added to the tension and to the polarization of the country.
Should a U.S.-led coalition start focusing on Libya in terms of fighting ISIS?
I would say yes. I truly think, realistically, if we're looking at the Libyan situation right now and to what's going on the ground, and the amount of the ground ISIS is gaining daily, and that the fact that the Libyan army is incapable of fighting ISIS on its own, international coalition, I don't know if it's going to be led by the Americans or not, but probably international coalition, one way or another, they're going to need to do something about Libya. To right straight away fighting like the way they're doing it in Syria and Iraq right now, I'm not so sure if it's going to be effective, since it's not really clear what territory ISIS is completely controlling or not. The intelligence from the ground, it's not yet clear. All we know, they're gaining more and more power, they're gaining more followers, and they're gaining more ground, which make them immediate threats, need to be dealt with right now. And I believe the international community and the Americans, on top of that, really fully aware of that danger.
All right, Heba Al-Shabani, political commentator and producer for Libya TV channel, with us in the Now. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, reports we hope are a joke. The one and only Donald Trump, rumored to be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Stay in the Now for reactions.
around 4 o'clock evening in Gomborungala. Near Maiduguri, Borno State. There are 15 people, 15 young boys like him. But the Boko Haram come attack the house. Take 1 gallon of the petrol. That's why he get this wound, because fire burned him very well inside the room. But the guy find a way to refugee camp, Dar es Salaam, Bagasola, Chat.
Most people think to stand out in this business, you need to be the first one on top of the story, or the person with the loudest voice or the biggest ratings. In truth, to stand out in the news business, you just need to ask the right questions and demand the right answers. Question more.
The old adage has it that teaching a man to fish will feed him for a lifetime. But will it really? With marine ecosystems increasingly threatened by overfishing and pollution, scientists say there may soon be more plastics in the oceans than fish. Is it already too late to reverse the course?
If you are born in the village, like my village, and you have the color which I have, for sure, you have to suffer. People think that we do not die. People are being hunting us. People are being chopped our body parts. We are being isolated because of skin color.
We've built enough pipeline to wrap around the entire Earth once. So I'm all for pipelines, I'm all for oil production.
We want it to be safe, and we want this to be the best place to raise our daughter. This completely turns our world upside down.
The project is fully engineered and ready to go. A demand for crude oil is expected to increase quite substantially over the coming decades.
I'm scared to death.
Welcome back. I'm Anissa Nawe, and you're in the Now. The Guardian has recently decided, to remove an option to comment on their site concerning articles about refugees and race. Joining us in the Now is Glyn Ford, a senior advisor at G+ Europe, also a former British MEP, speaking to us from Brussels. Thanks for being with us. Is this censorship?
Well, in a way it is, although there's no sort of human right to have a comment column in a newspaper. But yes, I'm slightly surprised that they've taken that choice.
But sites like The Guardian do have to take steps to block or monitor hate speech, right? I assume that's what's behind this. But where do you draw the line?
Well, I mean, there's a difference between taking down the whole ability to comment and actually having a manager selecting what's allowed and what's not allowed on the basis of the law. I mean, as a Guardian reader myself, and somebody who at least reads the comments column, although I don't join in the comments, you regularly see that certain comments have been deleted for various reasons. There's a difference between that and taking down the ability to comment entirely.
In a way, comments could show the true depth of an issue in a way. Is this a sign of how serious the situation and sentiment in Europe has gotten about refugees and migrants?
Well, I mean, I think there are other ways of measuring how the general population feels rather than the self-selected groups that decide they want to spend their time writing long screeds to comment columns. Nevertheless, I think it's probably a symptom of a wider problem. If one looks across the European Union and looks, for example, at the situation of Angela Merkel, I mean, she seems to be politically at the weakest she's been since she was originally elected. There's now some doubt as to whether, if she fares badly in next year's regional elections in early 2017, that she'll in fact be a candidate for chancellorship in summer 2017. So, I mean, and all the evidence is that Angela Merkel's not alone. Those that have been what one might call soft on refugees, I wouldn't use the term myself, have been suffering politically. So I think we do have a problem, and one of the reasons David Cameron is apparently pushing to actually have the referendum on whether we stay in the European Union in June rather than September is because he feels that a new flood of refugees could tip the balance into the no column.
Just this week in Germany, a video emerged of young migrants harassing an elderly man after he apparently tried to stop some kind of sexual harassment on the metro in Munich. I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's certainly been going around the internet. But these bouts of violence, we've seen several, let's say, documentation of a problem. Can you blame those who express negativity towards migrants when you see this kind of flood of documentation of a problem across Europe?
Well, I think the problem is that, of course, one understands the negativity towards individuals who sexually molest people or commit any other crimes. It's the stigmatization of a whole group. Migrants are as varied as any other part of the community, and one would be horrified these days in the European Union if one used the same kind of derogatory comments that are being made about migrants, about, for example, the Jewish community or the black community. It's taken a long time for some people to realise that not all Jews are the same, and not all black people are the same. They still haven't apparently learned a lesson about migrants.
What can Europeans do or leaders do to make sure videos like this doesn't spoil the image or reputation for all refugees?
Well, I mean, I'm not in favour of stopping those kind of videos as long as they're in the law, and I haven't seen this particular one. But what we do need to see is get some of the positive messages out. Many people in the United Kingdom, and I speak for the United Kingdom because I know it best, being British myself, in hospitals actually depend on the care of migrants to make sure that they get well again. The doctors are operating on them, and the people, the migrants who are driving their buses and their trains and everything else. We need to get those positive stories out as well.
Just finally, the situation is dire, it seems. European politicians are making bigger and bigger statements, but doing very little, it seems. Why? Where's the hesitation? Can they not agree? Is that the problem?
I mean, the problem is that everybody thinks that there's some magic solution that's not going to be hard and expensive. The reality is, if we're going to take in a million, I mean, 0.2% of our population, let's get it in context, but nevertheless, in certain areas there is an enormous burden. If we're going to take those people in, it requires the governments to actually spend money to make sure that the schools that are available, the housing's available, and put that money in. And if you don't put that money in, the people who find their standards of life actually go down because they've got new poor people coming into their area are understandably going to complain, not because they're migrants, but because their standards of living are being hit.
Former British MEP Glyn Ford, currently a senior advisor at G+ Europe. Thanks for being in the Now. Republicans or Democrats? I'd say Republicans have better chances because at least one Democratic candidate sounds like a Republican in disguise if you dig deep enough.
Saddam Hussein's chemical and biological weapons.
Biological and chemical weapons.
And his nuclear program.
Seeking a nuclear bomb.
Aid, comfort, and sanctuary to terrorists.
Continuing ties to terrorist organizations.
Including Al-Qaeda members.
And there are Al-Qaeda terrorists inside Iraq.
Rebuild his chemical and biological weapons stock.
Enhancing its capabilities in the field of chemical and biological agents.
Now, this much is undisputed.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
And luck is on her side. Iowa caucus, 6 coin tosses, and Hillary wins all 6. What chance? Unbelievable. Bernie Sanders may be good enough, but you know, money talks, even if it's a small coin. A bit of noise this week. The U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump, who some joke or not might be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Hey, if warmonger Obama can do it, anyone can. But seriously, the biggest bigot in the world getting a Nobel Peace Prize.
It's embarrassing. It's so crazy. Absolutely horrible.
It is so dishonest. Oh, I can't stand him.
Unbelievable.
I mean, this guy's a total whack job.
The story now of enormous courage, aspiration, and hard work. Meet a girl who was born with one leg but chose to become a dancer and is now breaking boundaries.
I started in gymnastics and then got too old for gymnastics and then got into a bit of circus and then cheerleading and then breakdancing. At one point where people would ask me, oh my God, like, what happened? Or how did you lose your leg? Like complete strangers, and I'd answer and I'd feel so bad. And then suddenly one day I was like, nah, you know what? Depending on how they talk to me and how they approach me, depends on my answer. So if they ask me rudely, then I will come up with a crazy ass story. Yeah, there's the cat story where I'm saving a cat from a tree. There is also, I give the response like I've had a big night out drinking and I was drunk and I lost my leg, like everyone loses their keys or their wallet. My ultimate dream is to be performing as part of a big touring show or with a circus company or a dance company doing a world tour.
On that note, I leave you this week. Stay in touch online. Write us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you want to see some off-air exclusives, add us on Snapchat. I'll see you next week. Till then, it's now or never.